This is Karma calling, and you better wake the up.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Karma's Calling. I am your host, Lauren, and today we'll be joined by a guest who has traveled the world and truly found her true passion. Her name is Chloe Caldwell. She is a travel and lifestyle journalist, content creator, and on-camera host. Her articles are published in Travel Plus Leisure, the LA Times, Thrillist, Uprocks, Brides, Trip Savvy, and so many more. And she's traveled to 10 plus countries and all around the US over the past 3 years, with even more big adventures in 2024. I'm so excited to have her because we're really going to break down how to move through your fears to find your most authentic version of yourself, which ultimately brings you to your dream job. And of course, we'll be adding astrology. So without further ado, let's introduce Chloe. Welcome, Chloe. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited.
Hello. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah. So we actually have a really unique connection, I feel like, because we've circled each other, but never have been like super close friends.
Yeah.
We met through cheer. So that is one thing I haven't really talked about on here. I was a lifelong cheerleader, and so were you, correct?
Yeah, we were both lifelong cheerleaders and met teaching high school cheer camps in the summer. And it's funny because I feel like we both have gone on such different directions from that point, but we've been able to watch each other kind of evolve through just social media and staying connected online.
Totally. And like really feeling like we aligned at the same time of putting ourselves out there, following our passions. And that's really what I want to talk to you about today, because I followed you from the beginning, becoming a travel writer, also just a writer in general, a journalist, and being a content creator, putting yourself out there. But also you have a story of how you got there. And it was a journey of healing and spirituality. And so I'm excited to dive in that today. But I first just want you to introduce yourself in the sense of explain what you want people to know you do so they have some background.
Sure. It definitely was a transformation, but currently I'm a travel and lifestyle writer and content creator. So basically, I always say I write about the fun things in life. So I might get invited on a trip. Like, for instance, next weekend I'm going to the Caribbean, and that will turn into a story about the island that I'm staying on. Or I have an assignment coming up where I have to go to Aeropostale and write about how it's changed since I was in middle school. And so I always say I write about the fun things in life because I think that the fun things in life matter just as much. And that's also kind of what I share on social media as well. But I do cover all things like fashion and beauty and wellness, but travel is definitely my main niche and what I'm most excited and passionate about. But yeah, so I guess I share a lot of insight into just different destinations and how to make the most out of your travels.
So cool. And later we'll kind of go in some tips and tricks that you want for people to know about how to travel solo, how to even do what you're doing right now. And I know you have a ton of resources out there. So what do you think was the first step into following your passions, right? Because being able to write about the things you love is really cool. Not everyone can say they're doing what they love. How did you get here? Like, what was the very beginning of like, this is what I think I want to do?
So honestly, I always knew I wanted to, I think, write in women's lifestyle magazines. I was obsessed with 17 magazine as a kid, and I come from a family of writers. Like, I just kind of fell into it, and it felt like something that came to me versus like really deciding. Like, it was just very natural for me. And I studied journalism in college, but how I got into travel writing, this is like where I always say that the universe and the stars really aligned for me to be able to do this, because I was writing at a women's like fashion and beauty brand, and I was at the bottom of the totem pole, like editorial assistant. And my boss and I didn't have a great relationship, but she was out of town for 2 weeks, and an opportunity for a trip to Jamaica came up for the social media director, but she couldn't go. And then no one on her team could go. So then she asked if I wanted to be the one to go on this trip. And I know my boss would have said no if she was in town, but she happened to be out of town. And the social media manager went to our director first, since my manager was gone, and it was approved. And somehow, by the grace of the stars, like, I was the one that got to go on this amazing all-inclusive trip to Jamaica. And I mean, that whole experience was eye-opening because I met other travel journalists who were doing this as their full-time job. And I knew that I kind of wanted to make a shift. I wasn't really happy where I was at that time. And like what I was really writing about was not interesting to me anymore. So by meeting all those journalists, I kind of realized like, wow, I can do this as my job. Like, this is what I want to do. And so I really think like that experience happened for a reason. And since that point, I kind of made that change and other things aligned and I started working towards it. And another funny thing that happened is once I decided this is what I wanted to do, I met a travel writer at a random Botox party because my best friend, she worked for a plastic surgeon. She's in medical school and everything. And there happened to be a travel writer there. And I was like, oh my God, this is like crazy. This is exactly what I want to do. And once the pandemic hit, I kind of took the leap and left my full-time job to do this since, we were all stuck at home and there was nothing really else to do anyway. And I reached back out to that travel writer and she gave me some good advice and it all kind of unfolded from there. And so you can really see now looking back how things fell into place.
Which we can see in your chart. And I'm excited. I'm going to pull it up in a sec. But what it sounded like, two things stuck out. One, you knew when what you were writing about was no longer really what you're passionate about. How did you know that?
I think like it feels like procrastination where you just have to like slug yourself to the computer and like force yourself to do something, but and everything takes a really long time when it shouldn't because you just don't feel like doing it. Where I started exploring other aspects and different topics, and I was excited to get to my computer and start coming up with stories and just kind of like learning more. I was excited to learn more versus feeling uninspired. I think you feel that in your chest, like I was like, you feel that excitement in your chest.
Absolutely. I think that's like living life in alignment when you're like, oh my God, I get to go do this today and I get to learn this. And it's not always rainbows.
Right.
But,
yeah.
Like you felt that drain. And I see that really often with people is they're so drained, but they just like slug themselves. And it's like, you can choose something else to light you up.
100%. Even if it's something that you don't do full time, but you make time for it on the side.
Okay. So I'm going to pull up your birth chart now because when I actually connected with Chloe, like 2 months ago, I got her to read her chart and everything made so much sense to what you're describing is you always kind of knew. And this is what astrology does is you have a frequency, you got a dream, your natal chart is a roadmap to your soul. And it's whether are we conscious and tuned into the frequency or maybe we denying it due to programming, trauma, other things like that. And when I was reading her chart, Saturn is really the planet that's going to show us our karma and what we're going to be restricted in, but then master later in life, almost like our career typically. And hers is in the third house. And that is writing, communicating, speaking. And that is something that you started out. Like you were a journalist in college. You found out travel kind of came later, correct?
Yeah. I mean, travel's been a part of my life forever just because I have family kind of all over the world. So like we didn't go on too many family vacations, but when we did, it was like to England to see my family or to Spain to meet my Spanish relatives and things like that. So it's something that kind of was always there, but it wasn't necessarily at the forefront. But writing is something that even like I remember writing poems for fun when I was like 8 years old. And I literally have found journals and diaries from the time that I was 6 years old on. So it just was something that was always in me, but that travel did come a little bit later. And it was like, honestly, when we did our birth chart reading, I like every time you said something, I was like, how did you know that? That is so on point.
Yeah. And that's what I love that it's in Pisces too, because Saturn and Pisces is creating boundaries around spirit and energy. And so like writing poems is a way that you can literally take energy, what you're feeling, emotions that you're feeling and put them into structure. And you've done it your whole life. And it's interesting because that's how you started. And then it squares, which means it's talking to, but challenging Jupiter and Sagittarius. Sagittarius and Jupiter is your beliefs. And in the sign of Sagittarius, Jupiter's in home and it's the abroad travel. So there's been this tension between structure and dedication and your karma versus maybe a belief you held and you had to overcome it. And once you overcome it, you manifest your biggest desires, which would be all of this Sagittarius traveling. Was there a belief you had to work through to get to where you are now?
I think that for a long time, I struggled a lot with just self-love and like different mental health challenges. So there was, I think in 2020, I really finally faced all of those things that I didn't want to face inside me. And it took a long time, but I really, really had to learn how to love myself before I could pursue these big dreams of mine. And until that happened, I didn't really maybe believe in myself enough to do it. And once I learned how to love myself better and like turn to my spirituality and just like heal all those wounds, I was able to really go for it. And since then, I've just been able to grow.
I wish I did not close the chart for that, because what you just described is Jupiter is the beliefs and optimism and hope. And it sounds like for you, it was in yourself of like, how can I love myself? And Venus was also all in all that Sagittarius, which is self-worth and love. And it's in your 12th house of karma and 12th house of past life wounding. And so for you, it's deeply in your unconscious that you had to awaken to heal. And that's that square. And so then you did, and now you're pursuing it. But I do want to talk about mental health, because I think that this is, especially in our day of age, one, I love that our generation's talking about it. And so finding self-love, people can always say like, what, how do you do that? And for you, when was it your time at like rock bottom that you were like, I need help, or I'm ready to get help?
There's a couple times, and like truly, I did have like a true rock bottom moment that's like vivid in my memory. So first of all, I like struggled in secret with an eating disorder for a really long time. And there was one point where I was like, okay, I am ready to start fixing this problem. It's not helping me anymore, and it's not healthy. And I think it was like 2019 that I decided like, this is the year that I go to therapy. That was my New Year's resolution. And my first therapy appointment was like December 28th, 2019. So I was like the very end of the year, and I was like, I said, I'm going to do this. So let's do it. And the reason I booked that appointment was because it was just like, I remember like kneeling on the floor of my bedroom, like after a really bad, well, trigger warning or whatever, but after just like a really bad day of like eating disorder struggles, like binging, purging, binging again, to the point where I truly felt like scared that my stomach was going to explode, because, and I don't even know if that's possible, but I just was like, I'm scared. And I hit a point where I was like, do I need to take myself to the hospital? Like I really freaked out for a second, and I didn't end up doing that, and I like let it pass. But like in that moment, I was like, this is it. Like I have to make a change. I'm not doing this anymore. And so then the next day I called a therapist, and I called a couple therapists to kind of like feel it out. And I booked my first appointment. And then from there, it was a up and down battle for sure. But I mean, I feel 100% healthy at this point. And through that process, I truly transformed. Like I feel like when I look back on that person, like I get teary thinking about it, because it's like, I don't even recognize that person anymore. And it makes me feel bad for her, but it also makes me really proud that she took that into her own hands and finally confronted it. Oh gosh.
I'm like, I know, I'm about to
I didn't expect to cry today.
Thank you for opening up about that. That's, which to layer it to like, one, your physical body message to you of like, I can't keep doing this. And so I really talk about mind, body, soul on here, and how they're all interconnected and they're all talking to us. And for you, having a moon in Virgo, which is your health, and that's your subconscious, it seems like that really spoke to you that day, and you were like, okay, I hear my body.
How you were mentioning earlier that there was always something like really deep in me that like knows about self-worth, but I had to bring it out. I feel like I have always believed in myself. Like there's always a big part of me that like loves and believes in myself. Like that's how I've been able to like achieve things. Like I tried out for a D1 cheerleading program and I made it. I wouldn't have done that if I didn't believe in myself. And I wouldn't have taken the leap to like be, pursue travel writing if I didn't believe in myself. And so like having that behind me, like that snippet, just like that fraction of belief was enough to take this like next step. And it was a process. Like I really like had to like date myself in a way. Like I took myself on dates once a week, and I journaled every morning, and I like, there was a lot of ups and downs. Like some days it was really, really hard to love myself, which is weird now to think, because it's like, yeah, of course I love myself. It just feels easy. But before it was like, why is it so hard? And therapy was like a big part of that healing process. And I think also just like growing up,
When you were mentioning thinking back to that person and feeling sad for that part of you, but also seeing the growth, do you see that part as like an inner child, as an inner teen? How do you see her? And then how do you speak to her now?
Actually, I think part of what really helped me in therapy was like the IFS, internal family systems. My therapist brought that into our practice. And I feel like that's where a big change happened, because she had me like write a letter to my younger self and that kind of thing. And that's where I think a big part of the healing happened, because you want to treat that younger version of yourself nicely. And now I think I see this 23-year-old version of myself in that same light. Like, I want to take care of her and tell her, it's going to work out.
You have love for her. She's a part of you. And for people that don't know, internal family systems is a therapy modality. And what it explains is that our ego, the part of us that is here to protect us, has been fragmented into so many different parts. And depending on what environment you're in, where you're at, you've developed a part that helped you at one point. And a lot of these parts are outdated and we don't need to act from them anymore. We need to love them again, kind of like what you're saying, giving that inner child love and finding your true self in the process. Because that true self is somewhere inside of all of us. It's just hidden behind defense mechanisms sometimes. And being that observer again of all the different parts that might be wounded and like healing them. And that's again how we can use astrology is those planets are all parts of you, and how can you heal those parts to get the best expression, which is what your Venus and Sag is really about, is how could I heal that love and that self-worth so I can use it to my biggest strengths. Knowing that you did have confidence and strength really speaks to being a Capricorn rising. You have Saturn behind you being like, you're dedicated, you're strong, you got this. You took a lot of risks, like being a D1 athlete, cheerleader, you're in front of a lot of people. How do you think being a cheerleader in all forms, high school, UCA, college, created you to set up being a content creator and like putting yourself out there now?
I think that I'm just a natural born performer. Like, there's even home videos of me as a toddler and a really young kid where I'm like putting the camera on me and I'm like, look at me, and doing dances and things. So I have always just loved presenting in front of people, and cheerleading gave me that outlet, and it really did make me who I am. It taught me like dedication and all of those qualities that it takes to, I think, be successful in your own business. But what I loved most about cheerleading was like the performance aspect of it and being in front of a ton of people. And while I don't necessarily have the opportunity to dance in front of 100,000 people every weekend at this point, being a content creator and putting myself on camera is a form of performing that I've been able to keep in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. So you kind of had this natural energy of wanting to perform. Now, kind of for a harder perception of cheer and just talking about your eating disorder, and it honestly leading you to where you are today. And I think most people go through one very hard experience. We're talking about a rock bottom. Sometimes I call it a dark night of the soul, where it does bring you to your knees at the mercy of the universe, just being like, what's happening? And that's when that ego kind of breaks a little bit. And you're like, I'm ready to heal the ego and find myself. Even if it was hard, how do you see that eating disorder building growing up, and what were triggers for it? So, because a lot of people don't understand all the time what an eating disorder is. It can be stereotyped in society as it's just binging or it's just anorexia, and it's so much more. And how do you think the programming of society led you to that? And then how did it lead you into your spiritual awakening?
It's hard to really pinpoint exactly like when it all started, but I would say cheerleading was a big part of that, just because of that performance aspect of the sport. It's weird because to me, putting on the cute little outfit and putting on big hair and makeup and dancing and being in front of people is what's most empowering about it. To me, I love dressing up and doing that, but it also puts a big pressure on you to be perfect. And I think, especially as a flyer, your value comes from being small or being easy to throw in the air. So I think it definitely added pressure to that part of my mental health.
It's interesting what you're describing in the sense of, and this is what I've kind of found through a lot of my clients, is the thing that led you into spirituality, your eating disorder and eating health, is also surrounded by, in a weird way, your purpose of loving performing and putting yourself out there. But it was the potentially, the programming, because the value on Top Girls and the messaging you receive. And if you don't know what a flyer is, it's like the person that gets thrown in the air, like the coaches, what they say, what they do. And your ego attaches the part of you that is identifying as a flyer and identifying with all the programming. And so it almost got programmed into this person. And then finally your soul was like, okay, no more. Like, this was your experience to get you to spirituality. And so you mentioned just kind of having that night where you just knew it was time. From there on out with your spirituality, how has it shifted? And what was the biggest tool in developing it?
It's definitely evolved, and I think it will continue to kind of come in waves. I think at that point in my life, I needed to like dive headfirst into it. So I started journaling every single morning. I tried meditating, and I'm not one to sit in silence, really. I need guidance. So I would do like meditations at night, and I started reading a lot of books about the universe and manifestation. And of course, like continued going to therapy. And so I just like really dove headfirst. And I think because of COVID and being at home and quarantined for like a year, like many people, it was a time to really turn inward and like face those things and undergo that transformation. And so I really had the time to just learn and write and journal and go to the beach and watch sunset alone and just think about life. And I think once life got busy again, it was hard to maybe keep up all those practices, but I feel like I was in a better, more healed place. And now that I've healed, I've pursued a ton of different career opportunities. I'm in a place where I'm a little more still again and ready to lean into that spirituality. So now I'm journaling again every day and doing those things that feel best for me so that I can maintain that spiritual practice in my everyday life.
Totally. So I heard journaling, spending time alone, even like watching the sunset, connecting with nature. There's a perception that self-healing has to be really hard and tears all the time. And why it can be. Sometimes it's spending time alone in your own energy and figuring out what your energy wants from you.
That alone time is invaluable to me. And I realized that recently again, like me and my boyfriend moved in together this year, and it's been amazing. But I also am learning again, like, wow, I feel like I need that alone time to really just be with myself and like sit with that energy. And so now another part of what I think is a spiritual practice, and I call it my meditation. Like I always say, walking is my meditation. I journal, I read, and then I go on a 2-mile walk every single morning to the beach. And that's my time to really sit with myself, practice mindfulness, and be present with the nature around me, and just kind of think about my desires and just about what I'm grateful for in life. So yeah, now that's kind of my time.
I'm 100% a spiritual practice, right? That's what spirituality is. It's you, and you're very structured. I'm always like, damn, you get on that walk every day.
Okay, but that's funny that you say that, because I feel like I'm, like disorganized, or what is it called? Organized chaos. That's how I feel like I operate. Like I don't really have a lot of structure, but there are certain things that I am extremely dedicated to. So my morning routine is one of them. And it's because it really made that difference for me in a time when I needed it. Now I know I always have it to turn back to.
I love that. I've heard that from my best friend too, when she was struggling with eating disorder, working out, not in a toxic way, but like really fighting moving her body. And now since she was 14, she's never stopped doing that. And it's like, because she knew that's what saved her. And in a way, that's what you're saying. Like, you knew that helped, that that's your go-to and how to connect yourself again. Also, totally feel you on moving in with your partner and being like, wait, where's my alone time?
Yeah. And I didn't even realize it until I feel like the last year I kind of like had a lot of anxiety again, and I felt like I was so busy, and there was obviously such a big change, like moving it to a new city and moving in with my boyfriend. So it was like all these changes and stuff that I was like, wait, okay, how did I do this last time? Like, how do I come back to myself? It was journaling and my walks and just that morning routine that really starts my day. And it's really already like, it's made an immense difference. And I feel like so much better just having that in my day again.
Yeah. And I just want to highlight that it's so important that you came back to it, because I feel like so many people will get derailed because you're supposed to, right? That's life. You get derailed, you lose your spirituality, you lose your faith. And then it's like, wait, how do I get my North Star again and recenter? And I think that's really cool that that's exactly how you regrounded. So if you're out there right now and you're like, my life, I was used to be that way, like you can always go back, and that's okay.
Yeah. And I think it's important not to feel guilty for neglecting those practices at times. Because I think last year I would be like, oh, I haven't journaled in 2 weeks, I feel bad. Like, I would have to remind myself that it does come in waves, and sometimes it's meant for you, and sometimes you're meant to just like do something else, and you can always come back to it.
Totally. And sometimes when you do stray, you learn the most, and then the next time and the next time. And
yeah,
I just want to say, we've talked about her talking about her eating disorders.
Yeah. And I think like it is such a shameful thing to feel if you're going through it. So that's why I just try to be like open about my experience.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think it's not talked about enough. I think it goes into the patriarchy and women not being able to speak their truth, or not realizing how programmed we are from the patriarchy. And it goes in almost all areas of our life.
Even now talking about it, I'm like, it's still not easy to talk about. And I feel like there's part of me that feels like really nervous for this to come out. But I also feel like I want people to hear their story in my own and be able to know that they can get better and move on from it.
So through Chloe finding her spiritual journey, she found a manifestation. And so do you want to describe what manifesting is to you? And then we'll get into like how you do it.
Sure. I guess I've always manifested is with visualization. And I think it was before I even knew what manifestation was. I just vividly pictured things in my head that I wanted. And so I guess to me, manifestation is just a dream that you have and that you can picture for your future self, and using that desire to make it a reality. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
Visualizing. That's huge. So with the quantum field and like the new research kind of coming out around manifesting, it's what she just said is your desires out there. You know what your desire is in your mind and in your body. And if you can project yourself outwardly into that future and feel it in your body, you can manifest it in your reality. How'd you do that? How'd you manifest your life right now?
Well, okay, I guess like to think back on like before I even knew what manifesting was, like I'm thinking back to the college cheerleading days, and that was like my biggest dream of all was to be an Oregon cheerleader. Like it was like that was what I wanted, and I was ready to do what it took to get that. So I will say like manifestation isn't just dreaming about it, it's picturing what you want and then taking the steps to get there. But I literally would picture myself on the field cheering, and I would picture myself at auditions, like them calling my number, and like I felt it in my body, I felt it in my heart, and I just felt so excited thinking about that, and it helped give me confidence and work toward that goal. And when it comes to travel writing, I think it was the exact same thing, where I would be in bed with my candles, like listening to music, just having that me time and really feeling the excitement in my bones of being in a new destination and making a career out of that. So I would literally picture myself like running and dancing on a beach, like those kinds of like true vivid like pictures in your head. I would just really see myself in that moment. And I think I would write down a lot of my desires. So like journaling for me is a huge practice, like I mentioned. So in my journal every day, I would write about those desires and maybe the steps that I would take that day to get closer to them.
I love that you said like the mind to hand connection, so important in the physical, like literally writing it takes it from the brain into the physical, which is powerful. And then you also said it's not just about visualizing, which is so important, right? Like action and taking steps. Were there anything like, do you use an agenda? Do you use goals to kind of track your actions and how you're moving through things?
Yeah, I mean, I think on a like day-to-day basis, I'm not someone who operates out of a planner. Like for some reason, it's never worked for me. And I've tried so many times, but it just doesn't work. I use like an online note-taking system, and I just do to-do lists. Like, so I make my to-do list for the week and I break down every day and what I need to get done that day. And it helps me to visually check things off a list, to just like track my progress. And honestly, it's such a small thing, but it really started from there. And I still use that system every single day. So I guess just even like, so for writing, it'd be like, okay, I'm going to pitch 5 editors this article idea. And I would put that on my list for the week. Or if it's for an Instagram partnership, I would say like, I'm going to pitch this brand to work with them, and just like put that on my to-do list. And it helped hold myself accountable.
So you knew your end goal, you knew what you wanted to manifest, and then you would make small little action steps to get to the bigger manifestation.
Exactly. And it's like I really didn't know what I was doing, but it was one of those things where you just figure it out along the way. And I reached out to people that were doing what I wanted to do, like the travel writer I met at the Botox party, like I mentioned. I reached out to her and got advice from her, and that gave me more steps to put on my to-do list to continue moving forward. And I think through that whole process of trying to become a travel writer, I learned the value of consistency, which I feel like I hadn't had for a really long time. Because you really, to manifest something, you have to show up every single day as the person that you want to be. And so I think for the first time in a really long time, I was showing up every single day, working towards that goal, and it eventually happened.
Absolutely. Consistency, showing up for yourself, and knowing your worth through this. I love how you're like, I didn't really know what I was doing, but I just kept trying and I pivoted. And I think that's the thing. Intention is everything. Like if you know and you feel it, and you might not know how you're going to get there, but it's the intention behind it and every step that you take to get there. And I think it's important. Like you don't have to live out an agenda. You can do a to-do list, or you could do an agenda. Everyone's different, and trying to put yourself in a box that people say, this is how you're going to get there, doesn't always work, right? You see that a lot on TikTok. It's like, this is how you're going to make $1 million or whatever. And these are the steps. And it's like, you got to find what works for you. It could totally. But if you're working with the system that doesn't work for you, it's not going to be as in flow.
Exactly. So I just kind of found what worked for me. And even now I share a lot of resources for people who want to get into a similar field. But I always say this is what worked for me. I think it can work for you, but everyone's different.
And the last thing before we get into like really how you got there and the resources you provide for others, Expanders, which was the travel writer in the Botox party, in
Oh, yeah.
2 p.m. to be magnetic. Want to give them credit for this, but it's this form of manifesting. It's this community. And they talk about how your mind can't always see where you want to go. And sometimes you need to see it in the physical world to be able to manifest it. And they call them expanders. So finding people who are doing it so your mind can then project and know that it can be your reality. And when I learned this, I was like, whoa, that makes so much sense. And it sounds like that really helped you, like finding people and then growing in that direction.
Yeah. And I think part of that also, though, is like feeling sort of imposter syndrome. Like, well, I can't do what they did, but you have to just change the mindset to be like, they did this, I can too.
Okay, so tell us, you said that you have some resources out there for people who want to be content creators. Tell me about your job, because I have a few questions. I want to know, what's it like traveling all the time? Because you're on the go. What is that like? What are the perks? What are the struggles? And kind of give like a background into it. Because I think sometimes it can be glamorized. Like I used to think I wanted to travel all the time. And I learned that would not be me with my Cancer moon. So I want to hear from you. Like, yeah, kind of the inside scoop.
Yeah. So I guess if you don't like know the basics, a travel writer is someone who will get invited to different destinations or hotels. And it's usually they're invited by those PR companies that represent the destinations. And you will experience the different attractions and amenities in any given place and then form a story about it and pitch that idea to different publishers. And obviously the perks are being able to travel around the world essentially for free in exchange for a published article and being able to see amazing places. I have been able to do some things that I never, ever would have been able to afford or do had it not been for my job. And I'm so grateful for that. And it has been truly incredible. But at the same time, like you said, I'm always on the go. And I think that finding balance has been the biggest challenge for me. And I'm such a yes person. I want to say yes to every opportunity, but I'm learning that I need to take a step back and still spend time at home and prioritize those routines, like that morning routine I was talking about. Because when you travel so much, you really get taken out of all those routines and it can make me a little anxious. I get really exhausted. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge of traveling all the time is just finding that balance and staying up with your routines.
Okay, so the challenges of daily routine, I have to ask because my husband is now traveling a ton for work. Is it hard on your relationship? Because people keep asking me like, oh, is it hard that he's gone all the time? And I'm like, not yet, because I get all my shit done.
Yeah.
But has it ever been hard for you guys? What's that like?
I think it's been hard in the sense that I have an anxious attachment style. So sometimes when I'm gone, I feel like I get like maybe a little more irritable or like, hello, where are you? Like, just a little more needy when I'm away. But to be honest, I think that having our time apart makes our relationship that much better, as long as I'm not gone for like months at a time, which I never am. I think we both are the kind of people who like our own hobbies and our alone time, and then we can come back together and it's more exciting and fun to be back together. It was a really big challenge. I was living in LA and he was living in San Diego, and we were trying to do that semi-long distance in between all my trips. And that was a really big challenge because it was really exhausting and difficult to find that balance. And so that's where I kind of lost those spiritual practices, because in terms of time and just priorities, it fell behind some other things. But now that we live together, I've been able to turn back to those practices. And now the travel has not really been a challenge for us yet. I mean, hopefully it won't be.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think that kind of loop to what we were talking about is sometimes when you stray from your spiritual practices, you learn a lot. And like, this was your partner, right? You're like, I'm sacrificing certain things and now I have this and now I can combine them all together.
Exactly. And it's funny because he's so structured. Like he is a 9-to-5 guy, but he loves that corporate ladder. Like that's his ideal lifestyle. And so we couldn't be more different in that way. But I think we really balance each other out in that way.
I mean, hey, the saying opposites attract really does mean two different energies need to come together to balance that out. And so it's like why opposites in actual like hobbies and things like that might come, but some have to be similar. Research shows the opposite in that kind of stuff is what attracts people of type A versus type B, go with the flow, like, and that's where you'll find, but also the challenges of a relationship, which I love finding astrology because you can see like, oh, that makes sense of why you guys come together.
Yeah, I keep bugging him. I'm like, you need to find out your birth time. I need to get your birth chart. I want I need to text your mom and get your birth time so I can figure this out.
Okay, so if someone wanted to get into the career you're getting into, what is some advice you would say? And then also, what do you provide for people with resources? Because I see that on TikTok. You'll be like, if you follow her on TikTok, by
Right.
the way, what's your handle? I'll say it again later, but what is your handle?
I'm just by Chloe Caldwell across all social media platforms. I definitely share the most about travel writing advice on TikTok, but you can find me anywhere under that handle.
Perfect. So what would you say? What's your advice with it?
I always say that the first step is just to reach out to people that inspire you and see if they might give you a couple minutes of your time to share advice. I think that was the first step I took when I was like, I don't know what to do. So I need to go to other people and find that out. And it's obviously best to kind of find people within your network or someone who knows someone and just make that connection. And a lot of the time people will give you a few minutes of their time because they've been in your shoes. So at this point, like if someone came to me and asked for advice, I would have it. But I was also that person who had no clue what I was doing at the beginning. Of course, there's a lot of resources too that you can pay for. And it's always great to pay someone for your time if you can and if they offer those resources. But yeah, so I would just say utilize your network. And then in terms of like if you really actually want to get into travel writing, I always say if you don't have writing experience, to start a blog and really just start putting yourself out there and sharing on your social media. Like start a blog, write articles about your hometown, like the best restaurants in your city and the best things to do. If you don't have the resources to go on huge trips, just start small and stay local and become an expert in your hometown and grow from there.
That's cool. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you. And then is there anything else that you want to share about anything you do? And is there a specific, I was thinking about it, you really got into fashion as well, and you're a writer on multiple forms of different things. Would you say there's sometimes a niche, like if you wanted to be a travel content creator for like food or like hotels, or is it all kind of the same?
There's definitely a lot of niches. So like you could do like this year I'm really getting into beach travel. All my trips so far are like tropical because that's just like I feel like I come alive on an island and I think I just glow differently in a tropical environment. So I'm like really leaning into that this year. And that's definitely helpful if you want to become an expert in specific types of travel. Like if you want to be a hiking travel writer or you want to focus specifically on hotel reviews. Anything that you're interested in doing, you can always find a niche and like go further into that. I think it definitely takes time to find what you love and want to lean into. Like I'm just now kind of leaning into that and I've been doing this for 3 years. So it takes time and yeah, just allow yourself to try different things and experiment and figure out what suits you.
Which leads us into your chart because I'm going to write down time. That is a very Capricorn thing to say. So let's pull your chart up again because now that we got to know you a little bit, heard your story, we can really see it in your chart. And so I just want to give the people listening a little bit of the power of astrology in the sense of finding yourself, understanding your energy, and healing too. So right off the bat, she was kind of talking about how she always knew that strength. And I talked about being a Saturn ruled person. And that is a Capricorn rising or an Aquarius rising. You are ruled by Saturn. Whatever your rising sign is, whatever sign rules your first house is the planet that rules you, that you're going to act most like. And it's going to be your biggest strength. And whenever it's doing anything in the sky, you feel it more than anyone else. And why I want to start with Saturn is one, she just said time, give it time. And that is what Saturn rules because it's dedication and its responsibility and its structure. It's saying you have to allow it to build, to master it. It's not going to come like this. And that's what our Saturn placement is. It is our end passions and our goals in life. But a lot of us get bogged down when it's not immediately here due to the programming of society, evolution, all the things, right? And so what Chloe is going through right now is her Saturn return. So in pop astrology, the Saturn returns talked a lot about as this like scary time. And I just want to say it's not always scary. What it is just like how I was saying, it's showing you with time, you become more mature and you get closer to your passions. And it takes Saturn in the sky to take 28 to 30 years to get to the exact spot of your birth chart from when you're born. So at the end of next year, she's turning 29. This year, end of this year, because your birthday's
November. Yeah.
So Saturn is going to come right to where her Saturn is in her birth chart. This is called a conjunction. And this is going to happen actually this summer for her. And it is kind of allowing her to see all her progress that she's gone through. And Saturn returns are only scary when you haven't heard the call. And for Chloe, she's gone through a lot. And she heard the call and she dedicated herself and she's doing her purpose based off of her birth chart. And so I just want to assure you that your Saturn return is probably not going to be this scary thing. If anything, it's actually going to be a boost in what you're already doing because you have dedicated yourself. Does that make sense?
Totally. I'm still a little scared, but that makes me feel a lot better. And now I know I need to look out in the summer, but that actually feels, I identify with what you're saying. I feel like this year I'm already feeling that in my energy and environment that this is happening. So I feel mostly just positive this year and I hope that lasts.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. Like, keep that because will maybe unexpected things happen? It could. But I think really what it's saying is you're finding your purpose, you're finding your calling, and you're aligning yourself. The fact that you were like, I'm doing beach stuff because I feel called to that. And you're not self-sacrificing for other things that you don't really feel aligned for. That's the purpose of Saturn. It's dedicating yourself to what your soul really wants. And so, and because you're Saturn ruled, this is a very important transit for you. This is you stepping into your own. And I'm really excited for what that's to come, which leads me into all of your Sagittarius placements. So Sagittarius is the sign of foreign travel, like I was saying in the beginning, but it really is around adventure. It's around freedom. It's around being able to explore and not be tied down. And you were kind of talking about routine and how you're not a structured person, which goes against, or you are, but you're not. And that's literally Saturn versus Sagittarius.
That's so crazy. Everything you're saying right now, again, it's like, I'm like, wow. Like even just the little things that you're saying, I'm like, that is incredibly accurate. Like,
yeah. And that's where that square I was talking about, your Jupiter squares your Saturn, your sense for freedom, your sense for travel squares this like need for structure. But to layer it further, Pisces is mutable too. And so mutable signs go with the flow. They don't like structure. They need to adapt. And that's Pisces, Gemini, and Virgo, and Sagittarius. So for Chloe, she has 4 in Sagittarius, 1 in Pisces, and 1 in Virgo. So she's highly, highly mutable. But then she's also very cardinal to some degree and fixed, but she's more mutable. So that's why she's like, I do a to-do list. That's all I need. And that's enough structure for me. And that makes a lot of sense. With Sagittarius being your 12th house. So 12th house is hidden things. It's things that aren't fully conscious until later in life. We have to turn these planets on. That freedom seeking. When did you know that you need a balance? And have you figured that out? Were you someone who was more loosey-goosey, or were you more someone trying to get into the mold of society? Because society does not like freedom.
I think as soon as I started working in the traditional 9-to-5 world, when I graduated college, I was like, wait, this isn't what I thought it would be. And I hate it. I know that sounds bad, but like, no. I just, even if I like really like my job, I just feel like having to be somewhere at a certain time every day is like really difficult for me. And it's not because I don't like the job. It's just because it feels like a little soul sucking to me. So I think I kind of figured that out early on.
Well, what's funny about it is if you haven't listened to the Pluto episode, go listen to the Pluto episode because she has a Pluto at 0 degrees in Sagittarius. Pluto is generational. Sagittarius is the Gen Z and Scorpio is the millennial. We were born on the cusp. We kind of go either way. But if you have a Pluto in Sag, that is the generation of breaking down the 9-to-5. That is the generation of saying, I don't have to do that. Why do I have to do that? And that's what you're saying. Like your soul did not align with that. That is not the energy that you came in wanting. And you're here to help change that. Being out there sharing what you're doing, which leads me to your Scorpio. So 11th house is groups of people. It's networking. And so that is a house of putting yourself out in front of people and your sun's there. And so your sun sign is really how you're going to be known and how you're going to shine. So I loved that it is in the 11th house. You're going to be known through groups of people and networking. And that's literally how you said you kind of got there is like use your network. That's a big advice you have. I love that. What else about Scorpio? Scorpio is less public. And so I find that really interesting. Scorpio is the investigator. They love the darkness. They love to be hidden and kind of investigate and bring things to life and taboo topics upward. And so we kind of talked about that of where you could take your business, but how do you identify with Scorpio and what do you feel like you're integrating in your business now that reflects that?
Well, I think it's interesting because I do present as this like really bubbly, outgoing person, but I think that there's a huge part of me that is very Scorpio and that it really enjoys kind of that moody, quiet. I still like write poetry I write poetry for myself. And I feel like when I'm in that kind of mode with like my candles on and I'm really just in my like feminine energy, I guess, that's when I feel really, really like my true core self shine. And so I guess maybe I bring some of that out in my business just in terms of being open about topics like therapy and sharing insight into subjects that maybe are otherwise ignored.
Totally. Like taboo topics and stuff that
Mm-hmm.
society would shame or say don't talk about or whatever those things are. And you just released a blog on finances, which is
Yeah.
rolls over too.
Oh, that's so funny. How crazy. Good timing.
I know. And you're literally like, I know people don't really talk about it. I'm like, yes, that's Scorpio. I love that. And to go further, which I love what you're saying, like when you're in that moody, creative energy,
Mm-hmm.
is that Saturn because it's positively talking to your sun and your Mercury. Your Mercury is your mind, how you think, how you write. Your sun is your consciousness and Saturn is your karma. And so it kind of all really blends together that time alone, which goes back to what we were talking about, actually, why your alone time so precious is that's when you create. That's when you need your own energy and then you can take it and put it out into the masses, 11th house, groups of people. There's two other places I want to talk about in your chart because there's obviously so many things you can go into, but I think two things that I want to highlight. One is just around mental health. If people are watching, you can see that the moon is opposing Saturn. And so an opposition is really projections, and you have to balance these two energies. And having a moon in Virgo, the moon is your subconscious. So it's the energy that you feel. It's often your shadow. And so, and what you have to work through in your subconscious. And Virgo is the sign of wanting to feel perfect. Virgo rules over health and perfection and kind of having be very organized and whatnot. And so when your moon's in it, it's actually something you struggle with. And it can go back to your mental health of that's how your mental health manifested is more in your actual health and your physical body earth sign around that subconscious programming around needing to be perfect, which is really what sheer instills.
Yeah, I would say definitely that perfectionism is still sometimes present. Like I think I'm disorganized and messy sometimes, but it's weird. It's like when it comes to myself, like in terms of just my work and the way I present, like I am a perfectionist. And so that makes sense.
And your moon signs, forever practice, right? And so it is interesting that we find activities that activate that wound in a way that is going to help you deprogram later in life. But that's the journey. And why it's so important to you is it's opposing Saturn, and Saturn restricts. So it was kind of restricting and making you really focus on that area of your life, which made it even more intense in your healing journey. But also, again, your karma that you're here to awaken to, which led you into your spiritual journey, which is Pisces. So it is so interesting to see how that some of the hardest times lead you to your awakening. Last thing we'll talk about is what's going on in the sky, because big things are coming for you this year. So I'm excited to share that. The lunar nodes in the sky, that is where we have eclipses. So we have eclipses twice a year. And right now they're happening in Libra and Aries. And that means the North Node is in Aries in the sky and the South Node is in Libra, which just means the collective is moving towards Aries energy and that part of your chart where we're kind of releasing things in the Libra area of our chart. And we're learning how to balance these two. For you specifically, your nodes are in Libra and Aries. So you're going through a nodal opposition because your North Node is in Libra. A nodal opposition is a time where you realign for the next 8 years when you get your actual nodal return. So whatever's happening in your life, it started technically last spring, but really, really kicked off this fall because the node changed in July of 2023. And so this year specifically, April 8th, I'll be doing a whole episode on it. You have a new moon, a solar eclipse happening in your 4th house of home. So something new is coming to you, and it doesn't have to be literally home things like moving, but it could be you're going to start something new on yourself, your emotions, and that's going to lead into your career, if that makes sense. big things are coming for you. And I just saw that like as it aligns that you really are hitting that stride and becoming exactly who you want to be in your career. Obviously, it's going to shift and evolve as you evolve, but it's cool to just say, like you're like saying, it took time to get here, but I'm now knowing me more. And for everyone, the North Node in Aries, everyone is going through that. So everyone's going to be starting something new. In April, that's why you're seeing entrepreneurs. That is why you're seeing this generation saying, I don't need to work for the man. Like, let me go start my own thing, because we all have unique passions and gifts that are meant to be out, which is really what Aquarius is all about. We're in Aquarius season now. So I love that. So I think one thing that I was thinking about too, as you have gone on this journey, you put yourself out there so much, whether that's literally traveling or just being in networks and groups of people. Do you have any tips for someone who maybe wants to go on a solo trip and what that would be like? I don't know. I've just been thinking about that.
For sure. I think solo travel is an amazing thing, especially for women. It really breaks you out of your comfort zone. You get to spend that time with yourself. And I think for me, it really taught me how to have fun with myself. And that doesn't have to mean going to a foreign country where they don't speak English and you've never traveled alone before and you're really scared. Like, you can start, like I said earlier, start small and stay local. So really, I started with just taking myself to the beach for sunset or going to dinner alone. Like, start small and get comfortable being by yourself in public and just doing fun activities with yourself. And that will kind of build your confidence toward going maybe on a bigger trip. Or you could even do a little road trip to the next city over and get yourself a hotel for a night and just really take that time with yourself. I think if you want to do a bigger adventure, I mean, I just say go for it. I think obviously prepare, be safe, let people know where you're going. But honestly, my best travel experiences have been alone. And what I love about solo travel is that maybe this is a part of me that we talked about that doesn't do well under structure, that I love that you never know what's going to happen and it'll lead to the most random experiences, because when you're just by yourself, you don't have to stick to any sort of plan. You know, like, you'll have ideas of what you want to do, but it can change in a second. If you meet somebody or you talk to a local and they tell you of something that you need to do that you didn't originally know about. So it's just like a really good way to break out of your comfort zone, get to know yourself, and learn and grow about a different place and yourself.
Totally. Oh, you're inspiring me.
Aww.
I'm like, I'm gonna do it.
You should.
I need to go to another country. I'm like, and I already know where. I'm manifesting. But
yeah.
Thank you so much, because I feel like if to sum up the episode in a very short little thing, it's get to know who you are. And that's been your journey of finding yourself, and astrology can reflect that. We can use that as insights, who you are, who your energy is. And it's just like what you said with solo traveling. It's time to get to know you, going on walks every day. It's a time to check in with your energy, and we are energy as humans. And if we can tap into that, we can really start manifesting from that area.
100%.
Why don't you give everyone a breakdown of like what you offer, where they can find you, and all that juicy stuff so they can connect with you?
Sure. So like I said, I'm by Chloe Caldwell across TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter, or x.com, whatever you want to call it. And I share a lot of content relating to different travel experiences, but also some tips on how you can learn how to work in travel. And I will be releasing something really soon that will give you literally a step-by-step process on how you can do what I did and get your first travel article published and break into that travel writing industry. So make sure to stay tuned for that. Other than that, just my word of the year is courage. And I think like that's my theme. And I think just what I want to share is that maybe I sound confident talking about this stuff, but truly I'm still like scared shitless. I'm so scared like to do this stuff and to really take that leap of faith on myself. But I think that when you're scared but you trust yourself enough to go for it anyway, that's like where the magic really happens. So just put yourself out there, follow your dreams.
Well, I love it. And
I'm like the cheesiest person ever, but it's true. It's just like I'm cheesy because it's always just so true. So
I love it. And it's inspiring. And I just thank you so much for being vulnerable. I mean, it's hard to get on here and talk about some of these things. And you did show so much courage, and it's so inspiring. And like, I just know so many people are probably listening, and you've sparked something in them. And that's what's so exciting.
Aww.
And I've had chills multiple times when you're talking. I'm like, yeah.
So, well, thank you. And thank you for making such a safe and inviting space. Like truly, you know, your platform allows people to be vulnerable and share their story. So thank you for that.
Oh, thanks. Of course. Well, this might not be the last time we see you. So thank you. And
Yeah.
go check her out, follow her, and give her some love. To get in touch with me, you can head over to thelunarchild.com and book any astrology or therapy sessions. I'm also on TikTok and Instagram, The Lunar Child, if you want to dive into daily astrology transits, everything you need to know about your birth chart, and some health and wellness goodies. And I will see you all next time.